said that I want to point out. He said, let the wheat and tares grow together. Because you can't distinguish between them until they fully develop. In the 1920s, 1930s, you know, everybody kind of had some kind of church orientation. Everybody kind of felt melded together. Even when I was young, you know, the guy that was called the thug wasn't brought up to church. He went to church on Easter. He dressed up. He wore a tie, suit. Sometimes he was nice. He wouldn't curse around adults. You know, it was hard to distinguish between, you know, a church boy and somebody that didn't go to church all the time, because everybody was kind of halfway decent. You know, so that's the way it was. But as we go on in time into, you know, the 1980s, the 1990s, 2000, 2010, 2000, we see a distinction being made. It'd be a distinction being made in people and the way they think and where they're coming out. People are developing into what they're into. Like I talk about, y'all keep it real. What you into is what you into. And you let people know what you're into, whether it's your lifestyle, whether it's the clothes you wear, the ways you want to look, you let people know. But what's happening is exactly what God said would happen, that God is making the distinction between the wheat and the tares. It's separating. Now, what you've got to realize is that the wheat and the tares are separated to God, and He sees the difference. It doesn't matter that you're in church. It doesn't matter that you go to church. It doesn't matter that you're in school. It doesn't matter where you are. God makes a distinction between wheat and tares because He knows who they are. Like the disciples said, should we go and root up the tares, the weeds? He said, no, don't do that, because you can't always tell. You can't tell, but God knows. He said, wait until the harvest time. In other words, as you get more and more towards, and this was written 2,000 years ago, so as we get more and more in time, we see these distinctions growing more and more. You can't necessarily call it Republican or Democrat. You can't call it black or white. But these things are coming to pass so that these distinctions might be made. Sometimes things like this, conflict, strife, come to prove who's who. Because these kind of dichotomizing things make you take a stand on one side or another. And that's what God is doing. God is making a distinction. We got to understand that you've got to choose. You've got to choose. There is no in-between, because those in between will be cast in with the tares automatically. You have to make a distinction and stand up whether you're going to be wheat or whether you're going to be a tare. God makes a distinction, and there will come a day that God will make the distinction so clear that there will be no mistaking it. But before that time, you have to decide what you're going to be, who you're going to be. He said a sower, he had a field. A man owned a field, and he sowed good seed in that field. That's God creating the world. That was God creating. This earth was His field. This earth is His farm. This earth is His, whatever you want to call it. And He sowed good. He said, it is good. It is good. It's very good. He meant it to be good. But while men slept, men didn't stay on their guard. Men didn't stay on their P's and Q's. Somebody came in. Somebody came in, snuck in, and deceived, and sowed tares among the wheat. You may know the story as the serpent. That's the first person that we're talking about. Satan, Lucifer, the devil, the son of the morning, the anointed cherub that covers, the God of this world. He came and sowed tares among the wheat. All the pain and the suffering and the misery and the torment and the viruses and the murder and the rape, it was not intended to be. Death was not part of life. Death came in as an enemy as a result of tares being sown among wheat. Now, we've got to understand that this went on, and it's nothing we can do about it at this point. The only thing we can do is make our calling and election sure. Because the distinction is going to be made, and it's easy. I don't know what's going to happen after this election. I don't know what's going to come in the future, but I know we're getting closer and closer towards harvest time. And there will be a direct difference. Now, there used to be a time when you could just go to church and everything was all right. You know, everybody accepted that going to church. But there's going to come a time when it's not going to be tolerated so much. Because as the distinction is made, groups start hating each other and getting aggressive towards each other. That you can notice that's what's happening. Groups are not tolerating the other groups. Groups are starting to hate the other because there's violence ensuing. You know, not saying this to scare you, but it may not be so easy being a Christian in the next 2 or 3 years. You may not be able to have church openly and think that it's okay and everybody's going to accept it. Because what's happening as the wheat and the tares separate more and more is that the differences are being seen. And sometimes difference can be seen into made something to hate, into something into intolerance. Sometimes distinctions in people, you can see it in race. And some people just hate white people. Some white people just hate black people just because they're different. Well, wheat and tares are the most distinctive difference. The most distinctive differences between good and evil. The most distinctive differences between right and wrong. The most significant difference is between darkness and light. And that's the struggle that we're getting ready to face. Light versus darkness. Whose side are you on? Whose side are you on? You won't be able to play Christian. You won't be able to fake Christian because people will see right through it. The saints will see it. The world will see it. Because you have to make a distinction because the two groups are being separated. The two groups are not growing. They grew together, but now the distinctions are being made. He said, let them grow. And as time goes on, you'll see more and more distinction between the two. And they may not be so tolerant of one another. So we as children of God have to be ready to take a stand and make up your mind that this is what you want to do. You listen, you got to take on the attitude, I'm willing to die for this, Jesus. That's the way you got to get it. It's got to be like that. I'm talking about pre-tribulation. Tribulation period, you're going to die. You say you're Christian. You're going to. But post-tribulation, right? Post-rapture. But before the rapture, it's going to get pretty heavy down here. I'm telling you that now. And you've got to make up in your mind that if you're a Christian, you're going to be a Christian no matter what people say. You can't be a Christian around Christians, then when you get to the world, you'll be someplace else. Because then you tears. And God is going to see that. He's going to rip you asunder. He said he's going to gather the tares together and put them in bundles and burn them. That's what he said. It's harsh, it's rough, it's bad, but that's our God. That's our God. So we have to make up our mind to make our calling and election sure if